It's going to be less. First, giving honor to God, to Pastor and First Lady, and to those whom honor is due. When I was asked to come up to say something, I was nerve-wracked. It came as a surprise, and I was asking God, what do I say? You know, what can you give me to say? But what I heard was, give your testimony. You know, there's no story that you know the best but your story. So I wanted to give my testimony in the hopes that it'll encourage someone because of the things that I went through and the things that God has brought me from. I wanted to tell you what God is to me, that I know him to be a deliverer, because all through high school, I suffered from depression. I would be in my room, and my mother would come into my room sometimes, and she'd see me, and I knew she was praying for me, because all I could do was sit there. You know, I didn't want to move. I didn't want to get up. Sometimes I'd be crying, and I didn't necessarily know why, but I felt a heavy burden, and I knew that it was depression, but all I could do was say, God, help me. My mother would come in and sometimes find me with my head under the pillow with the lights turned off, you know. But God delivered me from that. So I can tell you today that he is a deliverer, because I have no longer suffered from depression. Since high school, I know him to be a deliverer. I can tell you that he's a keeper. He's a keeper in my life, because amidst the many accidents that I've had from childhood that I've suffered on to adulthood, God has kept me. I can remember a time I testified a while ago about how I was in an auto accident, but it wasn't your average, ordinary, everyday accident where you just get hit and you take each other's information. It was me getting hit and going through two signs and a median to stop in the middle of oncoming traffic. And I said to myself, I saw a truck coming and traffic moving, and I said, God, I know that this is my last time. I knew in my mind that it was my last time. But you know what? Before that oncoming traffic came and that truck came, the van moved. It moved, and I didn't touch a thing, but it moved. And the steering wheel turned, and it moved onto the shoulder. And all I could sit there and do was cry. And people who saw what had happened stopped and came to the window, and I couldn't even roll the window down. But I knew that God had saved my life, because there was a truck on its way to end my life. But God knew that I would be standing here today to let somebody know that he's a provider, he's a deliverer, and he's a keeper. And Pastor, on Tuesday, you said, if you bind the things that you need to bind, it will be bound on earth, it'll be bound in heaven. If you loose it on earth, it'll be loosed in heaven. And I said, God, you know what? Credit, when your credit is messed up, your life is messed up. And I messed my credit up in high school, senior high school, and on through college, when they came to you with water bottles and Snicker bars and T-shirts and the application and say, go ahead and sign, and you get this free T-shirt and you get this free water bottle. And I did not know how to spend that credit card, spend that money. And I was spending credit cards on $200 dresses at Nordstrom, not knowing that it would destroy my future for credit, okay? And I said to myself, I said, you know what, April, you've gone after apartment after apartment. You're 30 years old. You have 2 kids. It's time for you to stand up on your own. And I said, you know what, God? I've tried. I've looked for apartment after apartment, and my mother's a witness. Sometimes I sat there and cried, because denial after denial after denial. But I bound that obstacle on Tuesday night. And I looked for that apartment, and I said, you know what? I said to the leasing lady, I said, you know what? I'm going to apply for this apartment, and it's in God's hands. I said, all I can do is pray. All I can do is have faith. And she said, that's all you need to do. And you know what? I got a call back the next week. And she said, you want to hear it? And I said, yes, I want to hear it. She said, you've been approved. And not only have you been approved of free rent. This March, I don't have to pay a dime on my new apartment. And we've moved in, and I thank God because I know him to be a provider. I know him to be a way maker. I know him to be there when no one else seems to be there, when no one else can do anything for you. I know that God can, and I thank him for it, and I bless him for it, and I worship him for it, because I know if there's nothing else that I can say, it's I can tell you what I've been through. I can tell you the obstacles that I've had to face when my mother was up at 3 o'clock in the morning wondering where I was, and I was pushed out of a moving car. God spared my life. God delivered me from my circumstances and my situations, and I know that he'll be a provider for you. I know that he will deliver you from any obstacle, no matter what it looks like. Credit is a bad thing. It's a very bad thing, but God is greater than any circumstance and any situation that you can face. And that's my testimony that I wanted to give. And that's all I have to say, but I hope it's encouraged you and blessed you and kept you motivated to stay in God's word and be obedient to his will, and he will provide the rest.